Scandals had never happened in the von Zieten family. The von Zietens didn't approve of them. Sieglinde knew that one von Zieten had been in the war and had done something very wrong. She did not know which war, and now it was probably too late to ask. He had either chickened out when he should have shown himself a hero, or he had behaved like a hero when public opinion had turned against heroism and discretion was valued much more highly. In short, it was all just terrible. But Captain von Zieten rectified the situation at the cost of his own life. He shot himself with his subordinate's revolver, and the family sternly forgave him. And sometimes at parties, if Uncle Otto was drunk, Sieglinde heard him muttering stories to himself about Aunt Ilse, who hid her obscene passion for goats. And nothing else. The von Zietens were respectable, genteel, and impeccable. Therefore, when the scandal broke out around Granny Greta, everyone was surprised and deep down even rejoiced a little. They had a new subject for judgment. It took Sieglinde a few days to find out what the scandal was about. She was thought to be a child, and as soon as she entered the room, everyone went into a whisper. But at last her mother told her, on the pretext that it might be useful to her moral education. Sieglinde was seated with all the seriousness befitting the occasion, but the girl could not escape the excitement in her mother's voice, the sparkle in her eyes, and her gibbering enjoyment of Granny Greta's viciousness. And here was the thing. After more than 60 years of marriage, Granny Greta had decided to divorce. "Over 60 years," repeated her mother. And besides, as far as the von Zietens could tell, the marriage had been a happy one. At least the family had never noticed any signs of dissatisfaction between the couple. And not that Granny had any chance of making any meaningful use of the rest of her life. She was well past 80, I think, so there was surprisingly little sense in Greta's last efforts at independence, for the sake of which she had dared to scandalize, made surprisingly little sense. Greta had no cause for divorce, or at least Gunther assured her that he had given her no cause. Everyone sympathized a little with Dedula Gunther, which in itself was a little awkward. Dedula was a stout man, not prone to mental distress. It was wrong to sympathize with him. The family wondered if Greta had simply gone mad. That would explain a lot, and perhaps even mitigate the severity of the offense. Though, of course, if she was going to go mad, she should have done so quietly, without drawing attention to herself. Sieglinde had been taught to avoid scandal, and she tried her best to follow the rule. For example, she was only a few months short of 16, and she was still only allowed to see Klaus in the presence of adults. Even though the family knew that one day the young people would marry. Indeed, it was the family who had chosen this fiancé for her. Sieglinde understood. She should not ask too many questions about her grandmother and her sinful deeds. But she liked Granny Greta. Perhaps she was even the favorite of all the grandparents. Greta was a bit strict because the von Zietens were strict. Sometimes, however, when Sieglinde visited her, especially in her early childhood, Greta baked her wonderful gingerbread men. Sieglinde had never eaten anything as delicious as these little men. She never knew what kind of seasoning her grandmother put in them to flavor them. Sieglinde knew that if she asked permission to visit her grandmother now, her parents would refuse. So she didn't ask. Choosing a time when her father was in his study and her mother was in the kitchen, Sieglinde slipped away. She didn't want to show up at Grandma's empty-handed, so she spent her pocket money at the baker's, buying a full bag of brioche, some of it chocolate-filled. Grandma didn't seem surprised to see her granddaughter. "There you are," she said. "Good. Help me find my suitcase." "I brought brioche," said Sieglinde. "A long time ago, I ate my last brioche," said Granny Greta. "Some have chocolate inside." "Chocolate too," said Granny Greta. "So is it true? Are you going away?" "Yes," said Granny Greta. "Are you crazy? Everyone says you're crazy." "I'm not crazy," said Greta. "If I am crazy, I was just as crazy before. I just decided to stop pretending. All this pretending, I'm so tired of it. I made gingerbread men for the last time. Let's eat some gingerbread and talk." Sieglinde agreed. She hadn't tasted her grandmother's gingerbread men for a long time, but she wondered if she was too old for them. "Oh, nonsense," Greta said. "You're just the right age for my gingerbread men. All the gingerbread men you've eaten so far were just preparations. Now you'll finally get to taste the real ones." "But first," she added, "we'll find the suitcase, okay? They went up to the attic. There was no light there." "Your grandfather," said Greta, "kept promising to put electricity in here, but he never did. It's always like that. Tomorrow, you'll get your bulbs tomorrow." Sieglinde wondered if that was why Grandma was leaving him. "All is well in due time," Greta replied, fumbling in the dark, and then added, Aha, there he is." And she pulled a suitcase out of the darkness. It was big and brown with brass buckles. "Good," said Grandma. "Now let's go and have a chat." The gingerbread men were fresh out of the oven, and for some reason they seemed moist and juicy, though Sieglinde knew very well that gingerbread was never juicy, her mouth filled with saliva. Greta brought the bag of brioche, looked into it, recoiled in disgust, and without ceremony tossed it into the trash can. "Do you really have to leave so badly, Grandma?" Sieglinde asked, tears welling up in her eyes, which was strange, for she was not a sentimental girl. Sentiment was not welcome in the von Zieten household. Well, Granny patted Sieglinde's hand sympathetically. She was not accustomed to expressing her feelings either, so the gesture was clumsy and rude, as if a sack of onions had been slipped under Sieglinde's nose to comfort her. "I must tell you a story, the same story I told my husband, and you must eat." Sieglinde took a bite of the gingerbread man. It was delicious. "I came from a poor family much poorer than yours. I had a brother named Hans, a father who was a lumberjack, and first there was my mother. Then my mother died, and my father remarried. The stepmother disliked us." "Was she a mean and cruel stepmother?" Sieglinde asked. "I don't think she was so mean or treated me more cruelly than my own mother. Stepmothers can be hard. It's hard to love even your own flesh and blood, I know that, and it's almost impossible to love anyone else's. Oh, but this story isn't about evil stepmothers. Okay. You're just like your grandfather. Don't interrupt again." "Sorry." The stepmother didn't want to tolerate us in the house. She tried to smile at us, but Hans and I could see right through her. Her smiles were fake, crooked, as if she had a toothache. We played in the woods. We went deeper and deeper, day after day, and we got so brave that we could go into the thicket. One day, we were playing like that, and Hans said to me, "Well, sister, now we're really lost. Home must be far away, and we don't know which way it is. And we don't know which way it is. We'll wander for the rest of our lives, but we'll never find it. And maybe we will die here. If not of hunger, then we will freeze, or the wolves will eat us." And he cried, for my brother was a very tender boy. We lay down on the ground and were about to die. We accepted death, for then we were not accustomed to resist it as the present people do. But we had no sooner breathed our last breath than we saw an old woman standing over us. I said she was an old woman. Maybe she wasn't that decrepit, but at my age, anyone with gray hair, loose teeth in their mouth, and pockmarks on their face seemed old. She said, "Ah, my poor children, you must be quite hungry. If you want, I'll take you to a place where there's plenty of food, lots of food. My pantries are so full that they are bursting, and the walls of the house are made not of bricks, but of fresh, soft bread loaves, and fastened not with putty, but with chocolate fondant, and the roof is covered with licorice lollipops. Will you come with me? It's not far. Hans was my brother. I always obeyed him. Hans said, 'Okay.' And I thought this woman could be our new mother. I asked her what her name was, and she said she didn't have a name, and if she did, she had long since forgotten it. I started to tell her our names, but she stopped me, saying she didn't think we should get to know each other that well. And so we did. Just as we entered her house, she locked the door behind us with a big key. 'I'm sorry, Tangents,' she said, and frankly, you could see from her that she really was sorry, and we couldn't get mad at her. She said, 'As you can see, bricks are made of bricks. Cement is just cement. The thatch from the roof was blown away by the wind long ago, and while it was still lying there, it didn't look like licorice candy at all. "There's food in the house, but the food is you. I mean, I'm gonna eat both of you, you know? They're inside you, your kidneys, hearts, and guts. In short, you're both nothing but appetizing maggots in thin sausage skins, and the fact that you're still running around is no good. But we'll fix that." She bit off Hans's finger and swallowed it, then bit off one of mine and chewed it thoroughly. Because, as you realize, fingers are the best way to tell if a baby is good. "They're not ripe enough yet," she said, "but never mind, it won't be long now, and I'll have a feast. In the meantime, I promise to be kind and thoughtful to you, and to be a good mother to you. That's the least I can do for you. I really am terribly sorry, but you must understand that I am also terribly hungry. I am starving." She started to fatten us up. It wasn't easy because there was no food in the house. She would undress us and put us in a tub and rub us with a washcloth. You know, the kind of washcloth that grows on bushes, with the stiff bristles. The old skin would come off in shreds, and she would gather it up, every tiny scrap, and fry it, and tell us to eat it. And that skin smelled very good, like fried onions, and sizzled so appetizingly in the pan. But she didn't eat a crumb herself, no matter how hungry she was. "No, no," she used to say. "This is a treat for the children, and don't worry about me. I shall soon have my dinner." But sometimes she would watch us eat and couldn't help herself. At the sight of us, her stomach would rumble, and she would start to cry. We begged her. "Eat, please eat," we said. "Take another finger from us, bite them, satisfy your hunger." One day she did so, put them in her mouth, but shuddered and said that we were still not ripe enough, and that we had acted very badly and selfishly in making her waste 2 wonderful fingers early that were not yet ready. She got very angry, I think, for the first time since we had known her, and sent us to bed without supper. That was the order of the day in those hungry days, though. One morning at breakfast, while Hans and I were munching on scraps of old leather, the woman said she couldn't wait any longer. She was too hungry. Another hour and she would die of this unbearable hunger. And then, what would happen to all of us? She needs to eat us right now, immediately. And if we're not ripe, well, she's ready to suffer indigestion. She was too weak to make a fire in the oven, so Hans and I did everything ourselves. But I guess we made a mistake. In the end, we cooked it together. Ourselves. I kept asking Hans, "Are you sure we're doing it right?" As we folded the woman's arms and propped them under her belly to slip them into the oven, and he'd answer not to worry. The woman didn't blame us. She said, "All right, one way or another, that's the end of my suffering." I guess it was. We took the key and opened the front door and went out into the woods. Ah, how fresh the air was, how thick it seemed like you could eat it. And we were free. And we packed for home. I don't like this suitcase. "What?" Sieglinde asked. "What suitcase?" "I don't like it," said Granny Greta. "And those awful brass buckles? What a show! What tastelessness! Oh, when you've got a suitcase and nowhere to go with it, that's the last thing you need brass buckles for. No, you and I are going up in the attic again. Get up. Let's go to the attic and find a better suitcase." It seemed to Sieglinde that this time the darkness in the attic was even darker than before, which was impossible, of course, but the darkness made Sieglinde's eyes ache. "Stay there," said Granny Greta, and dived into the darkness, while Sieglinde realized that she could not see a thing. She, Sieglinde, had young and sharp eyes, but how much worse Greta must have seen, for she was so old. She heard Greta panting with exertion, as if she were fighting someone. Perhaps she was fighting the darkness itself. And Sieglinde suddenly realized that she would never see her grandmother again, that she was lost forever in that darkness, or even dead, and that there was only one way Sieglinde could save her, to leap fearlessly into the darkness and give herself up to the mercy of whoever was hiding inside, begging for her grandmother's life. But she lacked the courage and, even worse, didn't even have that desire. Suddenly, Greta came out, both hands clutching the other suitcase, which was even larger, grayer and without any offensive buckles. She looked calm, casual, as if she hadn't just been in a battle with the monsters of darkness, as if she hadn't just been on the verge of death. But maybe she hadn't. "A drink of tea," she said, "is what we need. And you'll have another gingerbread man, won't you? Come, come." In the kitchen, Sieglinde said, "I won't take a second gingerbread man, thank you." Grandma Greta said, "Why is that?" Sieglinde explained that she didn't want to get fat. Granny Greta said, "There was a time when we didn't care at all about such nonsense. It was good to be fat. It meant you could survive the winter." Sieglinde replied that that was a long time ago, and now it's not good to be fat, and that Klaus doesn't want her to gain weight. He says he doesn't like girls with wide hips. "That Klaus is an idiot," said Greta, "and your hips aren't wide at all, believe me. I'm an expert. I can smell that they're getting fatter and fatter. Now eat another gingerbread man or I'll be offended and we won't be friends anymore." Sieglinde didn't want that, and she liked her grandmother's gingerbread. It was really delicious. "Aren't you going to have a gingerbread?" Sieglinde asked and took a bite of her foot, but Greta dismissed the suggestion and picked up her cup, and then Sieglinde suddenly noticed that her grandmother was missing fingers on her hand, which she had never noticed, strangely enough. "I liked your story, grandmother," said Sieglinde, "but I still didn't understand why you were leaving Grandpa." "That's because the story isn't over yet," answered Granny Greta. "Now be quiet, blood from my blood, and listen. I said that the air was so fresh and delicious that you could eat it. But we couldn't really eat it. And though Hans and I were enjoying our freedom and rejoicing that we had escaped a cruel death at the hands of the old woman, in truth, we were still in danger. We wandered through the forest as hungry as before and found no way through. We wandered for many hours and our feet ached and our empty stomachs ached, and Hans said, 'It's no good, sister. It would have been better if things had stayed as they were. It would have helped to keep someone alive, and she would have buried our bones and remembered us, and in the darkness of the night, sitting alone, she would have stroked her belly, and she would not have been so lonely.' Hans shed a tear, for as I told you, he was a very sensitive boy. But we kept on going, and when we were quite weak, we suddenly saw the house in front of us. It was only when we reached the door that we realized what kind of house it was. We had been walking in a circle the whole time. We came back to the very shack where we had been prisoners, where the bricks were not made of bread and the putty was not made of fondant, but still something smelled very good there. And we opened the door, and there, of course, was that woman, right where we had left her, and baked to the very measure. Oh, it made my stomach twist. I was so hungry for meat. "We don't have to choose," Hans said, and took the roast out of the stove and broke off one of the woman's arms and began to nibble. The woman looked at us with eyes that had turned white from the fire and looked like baked eggs. "Cover them at least," I said, and Hans did something better. He ripped off her whole face and threw it into the fire. "You must eat," he said. "My dear sister, you know we don't have to be fussy these days." And I said, "Won't you pick me a piece, but not too meaty, so that it won't be very clear that it is from a dead body?" And he rummaged about, and then he handed me something like a little piece of chicken, and I put it in my mouth and swallowed it. Oh, it tasted so good. My stomach rumbled with pleasure, so much so, to tell you the truth, that it sent that meat back first, and I had to swallow it again, more slowly, to make sure it wasn't a dream. That night we had a feast. It didn't take me long to feel remorse. They weren't necessary anymore, and why should I, since my senses couldn't deceive me? The body has so many different flavors: heart, lungs, kidneys, meat, and nothing bland, nothing tasteless. We are meant to be eaten, made for it. Soon I even pulled a woman's face out of the fire, and we ate that too. And you know, the eyes did taste almost like eggs. You just had to close your own eyes and pretend. I said that the food had given us strength, and now tomorrow we would be able to find our way home, and Hans agreed. We went to bed with full bellies, so full that we couldn't lie on them, and rolled over on our sides every now and then. And in the morning, Hans said, "Why go? The house can be ours now, and we can feed ourselves with what we find in the forest. Because the forest is full of children. All the children in the world go to the forest to play at least once, and many of them are unwise and go too far. There are 1,000,000 wicked stepmothers in the world from whom children run away, and 1,000,000 good woodsmen who don't care a bit." I remember the first child we caught. It looked at us with such idiotic relief. It said it thought it was going to die out here all alone. Hans said, "Not alone," and broke its jaw, because that woman was right. It's better that the child doesn't give its name. You shouldn't get too close to livestock. We broke off a finger each and tasted them, and they seemed ripe enough to us. But what did we realize? Then we hung the child upside down, and the child screamed incessantly, and then it stopped screaming and only cried quietly, and then the crying stopped. Baby meat is the best. It comes off the bones well and melts in the mouth, and it tastes of death, and death tastes good. You can live on vegetables, but you will not get pleasure from it. But by eating death, we felt for a moment that we had defeated it, that we were gods, that we would live forever. And so it was for years. We were never cruel to the children, never subjected them to unnecessary suffering. And that was also good and right, because an unripe child tastes sour, but a suffering child tastes sour. And we forgot our father's face. And we didn't care. I don't think we cared. One day we found a little girl sleeping under the bushes. She was sleeping right next to our cabin, just a few steps away, as if someone had brought her to us as a present. At first I thought she was dead, and a child, if it's dead, is of little use. It's edible, of course, but what fun is there in picking up scraps after crows and worms? Hans nudged her with his foot, and she opened her eyes, blinked when she saw us, and smiled. She smiled. Hans says, "We're gonna eat you." And the girl says to him, "I know my way out of the forest. I know the way home." I said to Hans, "This is it, our deliverance." And Hans said, "There is no deliverance for us. We are what we are, and we will never be different. We prey on the weak and defenseless, and because of that we become evil. So we may be evil, but we are honest. There is no home for us beyond the forest. Greta." And he let out a tear, but this time I was fed up with my brother's sensitivity. I said, "This is not the life I wanted for myself. Eating and pretending to eat something else. Pooping and pretending to come out with something other than what we ate. Fuck and pretend you're not my brother. There's gotta be a better life somewhere." And Hans said, "At all times, life is always like this." And then there's the baby. The baby kept smiling the whole time. I swear to you, if that girl had given up, whimpered like everyone else, if she had thrown herself into a fight or begged for her life, I would have given in to hunger and eaten her right up. But she was smiling. "So what could I do?" I said to Hans. "I'm leaving." And he said, "If you leave, we'll never meet again." And I said, "So be it. Will you let us go?" Because he had a knife in his hand, and we were starving. It was a bad winter, and the kids were playing house to house, and I thought he might not listen to me and eat the girl. And me too, I thought. So we stood there, all three of us, my brother, me, and the smiling girl. And then my brother turned and walked toward the house and entered it. "Let's go," the girl said and took my hand, and I clutched her hand tightly. And I assure you, I cried bitter tears. I don't know myself whether it was because someone had come to rescue me or because I had lost my brother. "Come," said the girl. "I will take you home." And we walked out of the woods. I got a job in a department store selling hosiery. That's where I met your grandfather. He worked there as a bookkeeper. He took pity on me. He wasn't afraid of my roughness. He married me and gradually smoothed out my rough edges. Oh, he shared my bed, and I gave him children. One of them was your father. Sieglinde asked, "What happened to the little girl?" And the family took me in for him. Or maybe they didn't take me in. They just put up with me. At least they never said anything like that to my face. And we've been happy ever since. I've never eaten another baby. I want you to know that. It's very important to me that you understand. I've never hurt anyone else since I came out of the woods. That's how I paid for being saved. What happened to the little girl? This suitcase is no good. It's too big. Why do they make suitcases so big? Who would ever think of carrying so much? And Sieglinde thought that Grandma was going to leave her question unanswered. But then Grandma Greta sighed, looked Sieglinde straight in the eye, and said, "It was a very big forest." Greta offered Sieglinde another gingerbread man, and Sieglinde refused, but Grandma told her not to talk nonsense. Sieglinde asked, "What's that special additive in them?" Grandma Greta seemed startled by this question, but she saw that Sieglinde was serious, and that she was already trembling a little, so frightened was she by all this. Then she laughed and answered that she added cinnamon, just cinnamon. So Sieglinde bit the head, and was immediately convinced, of course, that it was, of course, cinnamon, and yet she felt as if she could taste some meat flavor. Grandmother was watching her. Grandmother would be upset if Sieglinde didn't finish it. She didn't want to upset her grandmother, so she ate the whole gingerbread man, every last crumb. It was a very large forest. The girl admitted that she couldn't find her way out of it, and I don't think she fooled me, and even if she did, she fooled herself. We got lost. It got dark. It started to rain. We were hungry. We slept for hours on end, sometimes all day long, because we were exhausted and couldn't walk. And I said to her, "One of us must eat the other. It's the only way the other one can have a chance to be saved." And I said to the girl, "Tell you what, you have your whole life ahead of you, a glorious and untarnished life, where you have not yet had time to make mistakes, and if you have, it is not through any fault of your own. It's up to you to survive. It has to be you," I told her. "Eat me." And the girl said, "No." But I told her she had no choice, and I also told her it wasn't hard. And I started running my finger over my breasts and down to my thighs, and showing her the best pieces of meat she could cut off of them, and telling her that you have to cut them in thin slices, and exactly how long you have to hold them over the fire to cook everything at its best. I told her it would be easy for her to do. I told her I'd done it before, and my brother had done it, and we weren't special. Not like she could be, and she started begging me. She begged me not to put her through this. "Eat me," she said, "because you're used to it. You know how to do it. You'll get a lot more pleasure out of meat than I will. Why should you waste your giblets when I can't even appreciate the flavor?" And she also said, "Eat me and know that I went to this willingly. I gave myself to you. Feast and rejoice and know that I will look down on you from heaven. Eat me and let the last baby you eat be the most delicious baby you have ever eaten. I want to be the pinnacle of everything you have tasted before. Let that be the reason you stop doing this, because you will never meet a baby as juicy and meaty as me." And I said, "All right." And then she told me her name, her real name, and I let her go. Sieglinde asked, "And what was her name?" "Ah, who cares now?" And she asked what your name was? "Yes." "Did you tell her?" "No. What good could come of it?" I was about to hang her upside down and slit her throat. I gave her a name, a made-up name. It was a very good, beautiful name. "Is that what really happened?" "As far as I remember," Sieglinde asked quietly. "And she was juicy and meaty?" "Oh, yes." Grandmother stepped forward, and Sieglinde decided that she was about to share some terrible secret with her, something so terrible that one could be defiled just by hearing about it. And she pressed forward, because she wanted to hear it, because she realized she wanted her innocence defiled. "Let it happen now," she thought. "Let it happen now." Grandma Greta smiled and said quietly, "Shouldn't we go to the attic one more time, just one last time?" The attic darkness thickened even more, like a black wall. The light of the lamp from the stairs touched her and died. "You can't go in there," Sieglinde said to Greta, and Greta agreed. No, darling, it's your turn. You will climb up into the attic and bring me the best suitcase you can find. And Sieglinde thought it was impossible that this dense blackness would push her out, and she looked into her grandmother's face, and the face was old, and somehow it suddenly became clear that death was near. Sieglinde stepped forward, and the darkness enveloped her. All light was gone, every last light. There was something inside, in the darkness, something that fed on the darkness, that was not afraid of it, that could not survive without the darkness. Sieglinde bumped into something leathery, like a bat, then something swiped at her arm, a spider. But no, it was too big for a spider. And the darkness was thick, 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 like syrup. It poured over her from head to toe, penetrated every hidden corner of her body. A veritable syrup. Sieglinde could grip it with her teeth if she wanted to, could swallow it. For if she did not swallow the darkness would swallow her. She knew that. But Sieglinde did not want to swallow the darkness. She heard her grandmother's voice. It echoed out of the darkness, as if it came from far away. Don't panic, grandmother said. Listen to my voice, that's all. Listen to me, and everything will be all right. And Sieglinde knew that nothing would ever be all right as before. Never again would she be able to see, to speak, to feel. Because if she opened her mouth to speak, the darkness would rush down her throat. If she dared to feel, the darkness would feel her. But then she heard her grandmother's voice, and much to her surprise, it worked. Her heart beat more evenly. She stopped shaking and began to calm down. You probably think you know why I'm leaving your grandfather, don't you? Yes? You think it was guilt? No, not at all. Oh, guilt has plagued me for a long time, but not because of the children I killed. I was ashamed that I married a man I never loved and never loved, not for a single day in all those 6 decades. I was ashamed that I never loved my children. I kept having babies, hoping that I would produce at least one that I could be attached to. I couldn't. I hate them all. At least your daddy's as sluggish as a dead fish. He deserved to marry that slut, your mother. You know, my dear, that your mother is a slut, don't you? And that she never cared for you? Sieglinde didn't open her mouth to answer, but she thought to herself, yes. She hadn't realized it before, but now that she did, it didn't seem so important. I've spent years trying to be something I'm not. The smell of baby meat haunts me. I can smell it in everything I cook. Just a slight tang, a hint, but it teases me, telling me that somewhere there's something tastier, more tender, better. And I don't have long to live. I'll be dead soon. I don't want to waste another day of this pretend life. I want to taste innocent flesh again. I was wrong. All these years, I was wrong. I should never have broken up with my brother. I'll go to him. I'll go and see if he'll take me in. I'll fall into his arms and apologize, beg for his forgiveness. Maybe he won't recognize me. If he doesn't recognize me, he might eat me. But even so, well, my suffering will be over. I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry. Now give me the suitcase. Come out of the dark and carry the best one you can find. Sieglinde thought she'd better stay in the dark. In fact, it's safer in the dark. But the darkness began to recede, and Sieglinde tried to hold on to it, reached forward and grabbed it, the bat, the spider. But then she saw that she was holding on to a suitcase, a nice, neat little suitcase, and the bat's skin was its cover, and the spider's legs were the straps. Grandma Greta took the suitcase from her hands. She examined it meticulously. Yes, she said. Yes, a good choice. Then she held the suitcase up to Sieglinde, as if trying it on. And Sieglinde realized that now she would be put in that suitcase. And then her grandmother would take her into the forest and find her brother, and the two of them would hang Sieglinde upside down and gut her and eat her. Don't kill me, please, Sieglinde begged. And grandmother recoiled as if Sieglinde had slapped her. She even backed away a little. Did you think I was going to eat you? Said Greta. Oh, my dear, blood from my blood. I could never hurt you, because you're all of me. All these years I've waited to see if there was anyone in this family I could love. And now I've found you. Don't be afraid. Fear anyone but me. Sieglinde saw that her grandmother was crying, and then she noticed that she was crying too. The suitcase, said Greta. This is for you. I don't understand, said Sieglinde. Oh, so you thought I was the one who needed a suitcase, at my age. And why would I need a suitcase where I'm going? But you, my darling, my little blood, you will go. You will leave this place, and thank God, because you can't stay here with these people, these passionless people. And when you pack up, you'll take this suitcase. She handed the suitcase to her granddaughter. Sieglinde weighed it in her hand, and it seemed just right. Not too heavy, just the right size, and without any of those gaudy buckles. The handle rested snugly in her palm. There's no forest there anymore, Granny, Sieglinde said. They cut it down a long time ago. Papa said they cut it down years ago. There are factories there now. I know where my forest is, Greta replied. She bent down and kissed Sieglinde on the cheek. The kiss came out clumsy and rough, as if a sack of onions had been slapped across her cheek. Greta stepped into the attic. Darkness engulfed her. Sieglinde waited to see if grandmother would come out. She didn't come out. Sieglinde went home. She racked her brains to think of an explanation for her absence. But when she got home, Dad was still in his study. Mom was still in the kitchen. They didn't even notice she was gone. They didn't care about her. Sieglinde called Klaus. He wasn't home, so she left a message on the answering machine. Said they'd never see each other again. Then she took the suitcase to her room, opened it. It seemed so huge inside. It could hold the whole world, her whole future. She opened all her closets and dressers, looking at what she wanted to take with her. Nothing. None of it was of any use to her. So she closed the suitcase again, carried it down the stairs, and walked out of the house with it, into her new life. She would fill it on the way.
Subscribe to our channel. Don't miss new and very scary stories.